What's up, Breakdown viewers? We are going to give you something a little different today, an experiment. We are bringing our podcast to YouTube because honestly, we love the podcast. We think it's the best thing we do. We think it's the best version of the breakdown. So while we're in quarantine here, we figured this is a great opportunity to see how the podcast goes on YouTube. We're still going to show you everything. You're going to see all of the hands on the screen. All the information will be there for you. Anyway, here it is. It's our breakdown podcast.
Today on the breakdown, it's a slam, bam, ram, and jam in hand from Live at the Bike with Garrett, Andy, and Bill Klein. It's a $100, $200 cash game because of course it is. And of course, Garrett has $400,000 in front of him because why wouldn't he? And we could say a lot of things about this hand, but here's the thing I will say. There are multiple plays that are surprising, probably elite, a little bit crazy, and a lot of money goes in the pot. And it doesn't necessarily have to, or does it? We're going to get into it right now on the breakdown with Grant Dennison and Jonathan Levy.
Well, yeah, a lot of money goes into the pot. A lot of that is because it's Garrett and Andy, and these guys buy in for a minimum of 600 blinds or something whenever they play a cash game. I don't understand exactly what they're doing, but they certainly love buying in for more than they are supposed to buy in for, right? Like, what is with that?
I mean, you never have to reach in your pocket if you put $500,000 in front of you, in a $100, $200
hopefully.
game.
You really hope not to, but Garrett has 400K in front of him in this game. And by the way, 200 is a straddle. It is not, I don't think it's the actual blind. I think it's a straddle. So
I think you're wrong. It's 100, 100, 200. It's not 50, 100.
So then in that case, the 400K buy-in is actually really reasonable.
There you go.
Yeah,
See?
it's only it's only 1 billion blinds, not 2 billion blinds.
I mean, it's so far beyond anything normal. It's 2,000 blinds that Garrett has in front of him. I mean, it's just crazy. But
crazy.
You know what? Live and let live, I say. If that's what lights his candle, good.
To each their own. That's what poker's all about, right, man? It's about freedom of choice.
Sure, right, yeah.
Except for limit poker and pot limit poker. That's not about that at all.
Limit poker is about the beauty and the wonderfulness of limit hold'em, which is, many people can relate to, Grant. A lot of us out there love limit hold'em.
I mean, being a limit hold'em pro is like being a career bureaucrat. It's like your life is just this gray ball of nothing. That's what it is.
There may be a little something to that, but it's predictable. It's pretty predictable. That's the nice thing.
Yeah. So are the rules of bureaucry. People love that.
I feel like those things are changing all the time.
Are there rules of bureaucracy? I don't think so.
I mean, there's sort of are. There's like
guidelines.
Yeah,
guidelines.
You absolutely. I suppose. I don't know, man. Bureaucracy. It's a big word. It has a lot of syllables.
Bureaucracy. 4 syllables. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that not a lot of syllables now? You telling me that isn't a lot of syllables? You can attack
more than
that?
3. It's more than banana.
Yeah.
It's less than cantankerous.
No, it's not. Well, 4 is the same amount, right, as cantankerous.
Cantankerously.
So you're killing it here.
It's less than cantankerous.
Welcome, new viewers.
Yeah.
Welcome
to the podcast. Yeah, we tend to mess around a little bit on the podcast.
So here's what we do, in case you're wondering. We break down one hand, and then you're going to see how long this video is, but we're going to get into this one crazy hand. And we're going to do it right now, actually. It's pretty cool. The way this came to us is Max Sawyer, who's one of our listeners and viewers, suggested it to us, and this is how we get our hands. So if you have a hand you saw that you want analyzed, you just got to send it to us on Twitter. You see there's our Twitter feed right there. You can see the handle. Just include a YouTube link, a timestamp, and bam, that gives us enough information so we can watch it and decide if we want to do it. All of our hands are listener suggested and viewer suggested. So be a part of that.
Sometimes. I mean, there's been Jonathan Levy suggested hands in the past, and that's you. But you do listen.
Am I not? I don't count as a listener or a viewer now. I listen. You're
not a high value listener. Let's say
I'm not. I agree. And
Max Sawyer is a high value listener. He's one of the greatest suggesters of all time. Always crushing it with the suggestions is Max Sawyer.
Agreed.
All right, so let's get to the hand.
Okay.
The 100, 100, 200 game, and I guess you believe that the 200 is not a straddle. It's actually just the big blind.
Would it just, you think they would normally playing 100, 100? I just don't think they're normally doing that. We never
I don't know what they're doing on Live at the Bike, man. They're doing all sorts of weird shit on Live at the Bike.
Okay, but it seems to me it's much more likely it's 100, 100, 200. Also, who cares? It plays effectively the same way
Yeah, it's
anyway.
200, and Andy has 85K in front of him, which would seem like a lot if Garrett wasn't also sitting there with
Yeah.
400K. And Andy's going to start the action. He has 8 of spades, 9 of clubs in the cutoff, and he's going to make it $600. I mean, it's a little loose, but whatever.
I mean, it's more than a little loose. Come on. You've got 3 blinds, you've got Garrett on the button,
Yeah.
and you decide to open 9-8 off for no real reason, right? I mean, come on.
Because you're Andy and you like to play poker. You're here to
Right.
play poker. What do you want from
I'm
him?
just saying, when we do hands with Garrett and Andy, which we do fairly often because they play a lot
We've
of
done a lot.
crazy big hands, we often get, well, not often, we've multiple times we've gotten people to write to us and say, Andy's a lot tighter than you think. Andy's not this crazy guy pre-flop. He doesn't have these
Isn't
wide
that
ranges.
mostly just one guy, though? Isn't
Two
mostly
guys.
just one
Two
guy
guys.
saying that? Okay, there's two guys. Okay.
I'm just saying, like, this would sort of be evidence to the contrary, right? I mean, come on, 9-8 off is not like a typical open here.
I mean, it's not typical, but you see a lot of players make it. I mean, mostly
Okay,
bad
a lot
players,
of elite players, right? Exactly, like a lot of professional level
might
players.
open it because he's like, I'm gonna destroy you no matter what you do. I am Stephen Chidwick. I'm gonna raise when you want me to call, and I'm gonna fold when you want me to raise.
Well, it's also different though because Stephen Chidwick is mostly playing tournaments when we see his hands, right? That's a really different situation where people are valuing chips differently. Like in a cash game, you rarely get it through pre-flop. In a tournament, you often get it through pre-flop.
Yeah,
It's really different.
with 3 blinds. I tend to agree with you with 3 blinds. I mean, you would open Jack-10 off though, right? In this spot.
100%.
What about
and of course,
9-10?
I'd open 9-10 suited and 9-7 suited and stuff like that too.
What about 9-10 off?
I would fold 9-10 off. I understand some people would play it. I feel like it's a little too loose with 3 blinds, especially where it's like not easy blinds either. Like you've got Bill Klein in there, who's not super easy. You have Andy in there. John Sin, I believe, is the $200 blind. Like, why are we attacking these guys with super wide, like kind of ugly ranges? We can just do better. That's what I think.
Well, Andy can't apparently because he's very tight according to two people.
So tight pre-flop.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just one example, so maybe it's a small sample size, but I'm just saying. Anyway,
Andy opens to 600 in the cutoff with 8-9 off, 8 of spades, 9 of clubs. Garrett, who has $1 billion in front of him, 3-bets the button to 2,200 with ace of spades, jack of clubs. That seems reasonable, especially when Andy is going to open hands like 8-9 off, and there are 3 blinds to be had.
Yeah.
So I like a 3-bet here. Would you go bigger than 22/6 with 3 blinds?
Oh, that's a good question. I think this is probably fine. I mean, because you're 3-betting anyway. Like the guy, even John Sin with $200 posted, it isn't like he can just call pretty wide here, right?
The guy just won the main event. He could do whatever the hell he wants.
Well, of course he can do whatever he wants, but he's not going to.
When he enters a casino, people lay flowers in the path that he's going to walk. That's John Sin.
What does that have to do with his calling range here?
He can do whatever he wants. That's all I'm saying. He can call with whatever hands he wants.
Yeah, but I'm going to say he wouldn't want to call with a lot of hands once it's already been 3-bet, even if he's put $200 in there, even if he's a third person. Like, yeah. I just don't think that's going to, even if it's Garrett and Andy, he still just can't call with that many things. Like, it's just the nature of the game.
Quick aside, if you're in a game with Garrett and Andy and you are willing to lose some money, because you have to be if you're in a game with Garrett and Andy, basically, and you buy in for any level of depth. Let's say you buy in for at least 50K here. How often should you be cold 4-betting if you're behind these two guys when Andy opens late position, Garrett 3-bets late position? Like, should you be cold 4-betting like 15% of all hands because these guys are so wide and this happens so frequently?
That's an interesting question. I mean, part of the deal, of course, with this is that we have to be thinking about the fact that we're rarely going to get even a cold 4-bet through, I think, unless we've cold 4-bet pretty big. Like,
I mean, we could make it 9K, something like that, especially
yeah,
position.
I think we probably do have to make it that much. Yeah, I guess we're gonna get some stuff through there. I mean, it better work a lot though. Like it has to work a lot. And the problem is,
expect that it does. Yeah. Like, do you think Garrett's really gonna call 9K with ace jack off? Maybe he is, but
no. He's not gonna do that. But he might 5-bet with it sometimes. I mean, he's gonna play back at you sometimes. And if he sees you're 4-betting him a fair amount, he's 100% gonna start taking some of his hands with an ace in it and 4-bet you. For sure. Or 5-bet you for sure.
At the very least, this scenario, if you get to the opportunity to be in the left of these two guys, and this keeps coming up, it can be the scenario where maybe you don't cold 4-bet all the time, but all of those times that you're playing and you think like, I should cold 4-bet here, and then you chicken out because everybody does that all the time. and you
Yeah.
have like ace four suited, and you're like, this is the part of the combos that I'm supposed to cold four bet if I have a cold four betting range. Actually do it against these guys, right?
Yeah.
Like at least that, right? Like you can cold four bet the really good hands, and you can bring in some ace wheel suiteds at least, instead of just folding and chickening out.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think you could take some of your hands that are just like maybe just barely not good enough to call, but are pretty good. Like pocket sevens is kind of a hand like this where it's like, maybe I'm going to cold four bet that sometimes too, like,
I don't know. I kind of prefer like a king queen off or a king jack suited
sure.
type hand because we block big pairs that way, and
No, I
we can't really
understand that.
comfortably call.
Yeah, no, we have blockers with those kinds of hands for sure. Pocket sevens might play better against a calling range than king queen. I guess you could make the opposite case too, in terms of like we'd have to look at the calling range. I would guess that mostly Garrett's or whomever Andy is going to have when they call our four bet is going to have a lot of big cards there. And so I guess sometimes we're dominating them with king queen. Maybe we fold out all the stuff with king queen. I don't know. I have to look more closely at that. I'm just saying, like hands like pocket sevens, which traditionally would just be a fold in this spot, right?
Yeah,
Like
for sure.
I'm saying, you can't always just fold those kinds of hands. I think against these guys, and calling is probably not profitable. So I think once in a while, just taking a hand like that and four betting is fine. Even though, yes, I agree with you in general, it works probably better to take king queen and king jack and do that, or ace four.
Well, this discussion wasn't entirely fruitless because the
Yeah,
next person to act is Bill Klein in the
yeah,
small blind, and he has ace queen off, which is an awkward spot automatically because that wasn't one of the hands we were talking about. It's like a little
no.
too good to consider it a bluff. It's not bad enough, and it's not good enough to like go with it if you get five bet. So
Well,
how should you approach ace queen off in this scenario?
first of all, it could be good enough to go with against
I
these
mean,
guys
okay, Bill
pre-flop.
Klein has 130K in front of him. The effective stack is Andy with 85K. Are you really
Yeah,
going to go
okay.
with 85K with ace queen off?
No, 40 over 400 blinds feels like too much to put in. I'll agree with you
Yeah.
there. Fair enough. I mean, I think this is probably one of the few hands we can consider pretty strongly cold calling with, because when we four bet with this hand, we're usually folding out all the worst hands. Like we don't, I don't think ace jack is going to call.
No, I
Like
don't think so.
maybe ace jack suited on the button. If Garrett was suited here, maybe he'd call, but mostly I think he's going to fold if we put in a big enough raise here, which is not what we want. Then we have like all the dominating hands are going away, versus by calling, we get to keep a hand like ace jack in, even though we're going to be out of position and these guys are tough to play against. It's not crazy at all to decide to call here. At the same point, we're going to lose a lot more of the time than if we just put in the four bet right now. We put in the four bet, we're going to take it down a lot, or we're going to get heads up and then win a lot on the flop, or also just have the best hand a lot and get to win.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what's actually more profitable, but I think you can make a pretty good case that ace queen is one of the few hands to strongly consider making a call with.
Yeah. There is a scenario where Garrett has a hand like 2 8s or 2 9s and will call the four bet, and you get to win so much more frequently than if you just call his three bet, and then he gets to see bet all the boards and you have to fold all the boards except for when you hit.
Yeah. We're going to be out of position, which I think is another reason to decide to four bet more than call, because it's going to
Yeah.
be so much harder to play this hand later, after the flop, versus in position. We're going to win so much more of the time and be able to get so much more value that a call makes more sense to me. But so that's another reason to four bet. I think everything being equal, I think a four bet is probably more profitable right now from Bill Klein's spot in the small blind, especially with two people to act after him still, rather than, I'm not that you're going to be super inviting. They have to have a real hand to call because it's already been three bet, but we're making it more inviting if we call also now for John Sin, for example, to decide to throw some money in. And now we have to beat four guys or three other guys, and we're out of position to everyone. And it just seems hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think I prefer a four bet as well, especially considering the people we're dealing with Garrett and Andy.
Yeah.
But Bill, who for those who don't know, is just a very wealthy amateur who is pretty good. He knows what he's
Oh,
doing.
yeah, he's good.
Yeah. He again has 130K in his stack, so one of the ridiculously deep stacks is going to call with the ace of hearts and the queen of clubs. And Johnson folds, and whoever else is in the blinds folds, and it's back on Andy, and he has 8-9 off, but he's kind of obligated to call as the effective stack with a super deep stack and connected cards, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is what makes this whole thing so weird. Actually, one of the problems with opening 8-9 off is that against deep stacks is like, now we have to call the three bet. Now we put
Yeah.
even more money with this really bad hand that is almost never going to be good at any point. It's like so hard. Sure, we can make a straight. But honestly, if we have the bottom end of the straight, guess what has a better straight? Ace king. It's
Yeah.
not great.
I mean, it's not the best. It's not the best, but you can't fold at this point
No,
when
no,
it's
no.
what 1,400 to call and
16,
there's
16, but still, it's because it was we made it 600. Garrett made it 22, but still, the price is unbelievable. We have to call.
Yeah, we do, and that is what he does. That is what Andy does. The pot is now $7,100. The flop is the Jack of Spades, the 5 of Spades, and the 9 of Hearts. So Garrett flops top with the backdoor nut flush draw. Andy flops middle pair, and Bill Klein flops ace high with a backdoor straight draw, I guess. Not a good flop for the ace queen off with no spade.
Yeah.
So Bill's going to check. Andy's going to check. These things both make sense, right? Garrett's the aggressor. Garrett's going to bet. That makes sense too. He's the aggressor.
He flopped really well.
Top.
Got the ace of spades
too. 3,500. Yep.
Yeah.
He bets 3,500. Bill Klein's going to do something that I don't think is good. Maybe you can defend it, but Bill Klein's going to call with ace of hearts, queen of clubs on this board, and that feels ambitious at best. Like, what are we hoping for? I guess we're hoping to hit a queen and for Garrett to keep bluffing. But if we don't hit anything and Garrett keeps betting and is bluffing, are we really going to call down? Like, this feels like a big mistake.
I mean, I don't think I can actually defend this, but what we're hoping for is a 10, which makes us open-ended, right? An ace or a queen. I think that's pretty clear. The problem, of course, is a spade is problematic. Also, as we see, an ace is problematic, which is not crazy because Garrett can have ace king or ace jack or have ace queen like we do, and then we're just chopping anyway, which, there's some extra money in there, but not a lot right now when we call. This feels like I just don't believe you, but I don't like playing. I just don't believe you out of position 3 ways as a call right now. I think you should raise if you're not going to believe him when you're out of position. This hand would play so much better if Bill Klein was on the button. He could decide to call here because it sets up him being able to steal a lot on the turn. But from the small blind, he can't steal, right? He's going to have to, he's going to check. If it goes check, now he has to bet the river and hope that, Garrett doesn't find a call with whatever the hell he has. And by the way, Andy's still in the pot too. It turns out Andy has a hand that he's not going to fold. We see this. He flopped middle pair. There's no way he's going to fold. Obviously, Bill Klein doesn't know this, but like a lot of the time, this is going to hit Andy's range too with the Jack 9 X board, and Andy called a 3-bet, right?
With 2 spades. Yeah, Andy's got lots of calls here when he opens and calls a 3-bet. Yeah, it just feels like Bill Klein is going about trying to capture value from Garrett being aggressive the wrong way. Like he's choosing the wrong hand, the wrong time to do it.
Yeah. It's almost like we're hoping to get in a situation in this hand as Bill Klein that we can trap. Like, I hope I hit an ace and then I can check and then he'll bet.
Yeah.
And then I'll call and he'll be trapped. Turns out that won't be the case this time. But like, that is very optimistic. There's only 3 aces in the deck in the best case scenario. There's 2 at this case. And by the way, it wouldn't be good anyway. And even when the ace comes, if Garrett's losing and has anything, he's probably going to check it back and not bet the ace or not bet very big and not put a whole lot of money in after we don't fold once he bets anyway, if indeed he bets. I just don't think this is a good way to go about this. I agree with you. I think this is just a fold. If we wanted to make a play at this pot, we had our chance pre-flop. We could have flopped something and that didn't happen either. We just live to fight another day and move on. Take our $1 billion and wait for the next hand.
Multiple billions, perhaps. I don't know. He's got a lot of money, this guy.
I would like to make a pitch while we're here talking about Bill Klein for Bill Klein to become a sponsor of the Poker Guys.
Yeah.
We're here. We love you, Bill. I don't know what you do as a business, but whatever it is, we will find a way to promote it on this show because you got all the money in the world and we want some of it. I mean, is that so crass to say? Is that crass, Grant? I don't feel it's crass.
No, I mean, we live in a modern time when we're supposed to express ourselves and make our desires clear to the general public. And our desire is for a billionaire to give us too much money. So that sounds good.
Let's say Bill Klein was made, I don't know, lamps. He made table lamps for people, I made billions into the table lamp game. And he's
it's a quality game. The margins are absurd. You don't even understand.
We will find a way to work that in constantly, Bill Klein. So it's just a plea from 2 guys, 2 humans to another human.
Let's assume for a second it is lamps, okay? I have a way we could work it in right now, even in this hand featuring Bill Klein.
We can retroactively charge him for this. I love it. Go.
Right. We're going to. Can you imagine if maybe Bill Klein couldn't see that he didn't have two spades in his hand? Like maybe if
Mm.
he just had one of those famous Klein lamps nearby, he could have seen
Oh,
his cards better, would have been able to fold and save $3,500. Wouldn't have that been great?
I mean, it's one of the most important tools in any poker player's arsenal. You know, like you got to have one of those Klein lamps, because
Yeah,
otherwise, yeah. What if you misread the board of your hand? You'll never misread the board again with a
not
Klein
with a
lamp.
Klein lamp. It's a guarantee. All
All
right,
right, cool. We did a fake ad.
that'll be $12,500. I think
Yeah,
that seems
you
fair.
don't care. You don't care, Bill. Give it to
Yeah.
us. All right, let's move on.
What if he actually does make lamps? That'd be a surprise. Anyway,
Yeah,
Bill calls to 3,500. Andy is also going to call with 8-9. Again, the
of
board
course.
reads Jack 5-9 with two spades. Garrett's got the ace jack with the ace of spades. Bill Klein has the ace queen, no spades. And Andy's got 8-9 with the eight of spades. Seems reasonable for Andy to call, right? Nothing else to do.
Yeah,
I mean, you could
I think
raise
so.
if you want to rep a set for some reason, but you don't really have to do that.
I mean, Andy's got what is sometimes the best hand, but not super often when Bill Klein has called the 3-bet and then is called right now. But we have outs usually against almost everything. Feels like, I mean, we have backdoors, you know, not a great backdoor spade draw, admittedly, but backdoors as well. Feels like it's just a straightforward call. We're deep enough too that you can just like, maybe I'll hit a 9 on the turn, maybe I'll hit an 8 on the turn, maybe I'll hit a 10 on the turn, be open ended, and good things will happen. You know, like it feels just
Maybe.
straightforward.
All right. So there's $17,600 in the pot now, with all three players still in heading to the turn, which is the nine of spades. A very interesting card for Garrett and Andy in that
Yeah.
Garrett has ace jack with the ace of spades on the jack of spades, five of spades, nine of hearts flop, nine of spades turn. And of course, Andy has 8-9 with the eight of spades. So he's now got trips with the medium flush draw. And Bill Klein is just sitting there like, why did I put $3,500 in on the flop? That was
Yeah.
obviously a big mistake, and I'm gonna have to sell a few more lamps now.
Yeah.
And I don't want to sell lamps. You know, I spent my whole life selling lamps. I'm freaking tired of selling lamps, but these guys are making me. You know,
They're forcing me to sell more lamps, and it's a young man's game, lamp sales. Let me tell you.
I mean, when you first start selling lamps, it is thrilling, but it gets old. It does get
Yeah.
old.
Yeah.
All right. So on this nine of spades turn, it checks through. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that. I
Okay.
get Bill checking. Bill's giving up, right?
Hell yeah.
Hopefully,
should.
hopefully Bill's giving up. We don't know.
Well,
Nobody bet.
Okay, you're right. But Bill's not putting any more money in right now, and that seems like a smart move.
Should Andy consider leading turning trips here? Because this is the type of card that Garrett is going to check back a lot. And if it has a hand like two red kings, he might just check back this card, especially when he gets two callers.
I'm sure he's checking back two red kings. One of the things he isn't checking back though is big flush draws. Like if he has the ace of spades in his hand, if he didn't have a jack, if he had a queen or a king with it, he's probably going to bet it at least some of the time, as he has the nut blocker and he can build a pot for when he gets there sometimes too. He's going to get a lot of folds.
But he's going to probably call with those too, right? If Andy bets.
He is probably going to call unless we price him out. That's
Yeah.
true. I guess he could talk himself into folding sometimes because Bill Klein called on the flop and the board's paired and things. But I would expect most of the time he is going to call. That's a fair point. That is
I guess
a fair point.
Andy's concern with leading is that Garrett could have a flush and Bill could also have a flush. Like both of these players could have a flush, so maybe he doesn't want to bet because he's afraid of the monsters under the bed. Instead of thinking about value, he's thinking, okay, I could actually be beat right now, and it might not be worth bet.
There may also be just a question of a balance here, where like when we lead the 9, what other things can we lead? And what bluffs do we have that we're leading? Obviously, we could decide to lead flushes also.
I have a really good answer for this, I think.
Okay.
I think we could lead all nines, all flushes, all open enders. Like it, I think that makes plenty of sense. We clearly have 8-10 and queen 10 off in our range. Like
I guess we do, yeah.
So we get 32 open enders that we can lead, and then we can lead any 9 that we have and any flush that we have, and that's relatively balanced. And it's a card that makes sense to lead if you hit it. You know.
We probably can't actually lead all that many open enders just because when
Well,
we're in a
probably
three-way
not.
pot, it's probably too many bluffs. But we could shave that down enough that we could probably, you're right, lead all our flushes and all our nines. The problem, of course, with doing that is every time we're not protecting our checking range when we do that. Like
Yeah.
that's our issue now.
I mean, our
So
checking
we
range
have to
could be
like
full houses. I guess maybe we don't lead all. We don't lead all flushes. Maybe we don't lead the nut flush because it's
I
like
think we
it feels
just we're
pretty
gonna
safe.
have to check some flushes. We're gonna have to check some trip nines. Otherwise, it's just gonna be too easy to play against us, especially against Garrett, who plays us a million times a year and plays us super deep and is hyper aggressive and is paying attention to everything. We just have
Yeah.
to be. We have to protect our checking range by checking some strong hands here, a fair amount of strong hands. But we should clearly lead some nines. I agree with you, and clearly lead some flushes too. And then the question is just figuring out how many do you have here, and then maybe cutting them in half or so and then taking about that many of your open enders. I think 50-50 is pretty reasonable to be doing something like that, bluffs
Yeah.
and open enders. Bluffs and value, and then hope it all works out. Of course, there is some problems here too. We can lead value here and still be dead.
Yeah.
Like Garrett can, of course, have pocket jacks, right?
Right, but it's Garrett. You know, like his three betting
Yeah,
range on the button is such that pocket jacks makes up a much smaller percentage of it than it does of most players' three
of
betting range on the
course.
button.
By the way, Bill Klein can also have pocket jacks.
He can, and these are monsters under the bed. But
Yes,
I
they
do
are.
think it's an interesting spot to consider a lead,
Yep.
especially with the eight of spades. If we're going to just lead some nines, I think maybe with a spade is the best type of nine to lead
Mm-hmm.
because we block flushes, make it less likely that we're leading into better hands than our hand.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. Here's the question though: like, if we lead here and Garrett has two red kings, what's he going to do?
He's going to call, I
Yeah.
believe.
So what are we folding out? I guess what we're doing, we're protecting our equity is mostly what we're doing, right? Maybe we can fold out some slightly better hands though. I guess King Jack off may consider folding with
Wait, what
Bill
are you
Klein
talking about?
behind him.
Slightly better hands?
A hand like
Because
King Jack off is this like, oh no, we have trip nines.
yeah,
Hey, we have a good hand. I forgot. I got caught up in the whole nine thing. Okay. So yeah, slightly better hands are never going to fold. So we're just really we're betting because for value. That would be just the straight up
yeah,
move.
we don't want Andy to check back, and we think he's going to check back a lot, and we think Bill Klein has plenty of
Yes.
jacks that he's going to call with.
Yes. It's a weird spot because we're almost over repping our hand if we lead here when we have a bad nine, you know, like
Yeah,
we're repping trip nines and we're repping spades, but we have the like about as bad a nine as we can have. And
yeah,
that's the bottom of the range, except for the bluffs, of course.
but he does have a spade blocker. That
He
that
does.
changes it a little bit. Also,
It
it's
does help.
Andy. He probably wants to lead with a bunch of bluffs. He probably wants to lead with all of the open enders and some gut shots and stuff. Like you got
Well,
to lead some
i-
other value.
if he's doing that, then he should be leading with trip nines a lot. I think he should be doing it probably, you know, some of his nines he should be leading, some of them he shouldn't. And I think it's fine either way here. You know,
I do
but
too.
I think it's a fair question though to ask. Like, should we be leading? And I like the idea of it.
To be clear, if I was in his seat right now, I would probably like auto default to checking, and it wouldn't really cross my mind to leading until after the hand already played out. It would be my guess. But because
I
we're
mean,
taking an in-depth look at it, it's made me think about it.
I also wonder if you're Andy, if like being this deep is actually problematic, right? Like where you're like, boy, I don't want to lead and get a big raise and end up whatever I do, I could just sort of make a huge mistake, you know, and it like sort of sucks to like lose 400 blinds here where
Sure.
I didn't have to do that. I could just go into check call mode really comfortably if Garrett wants to keep firing, and I could pick off his bluffs. He is very aggressive, as we know. And this way, I don't like if every time he has pocket jacks or already has the nut flush or has any flush or has a better nine or whatever the hell he has, I just end up losing so many chips because he'll probably put in a raise at some point, depending on how the board plays out, you know, which just sucks for me. So I wonder if there's a pot control aspect, even for Andy with his trip nines here.
Maybe. I don't think it's unreasonable to check. And like I said, I would probably default towards it. I just wanted to explore it a little bit. Either
Yeah.
way, Andy checks. It's a perfectly fine decision. Garrett also checks. Do you think Garrett should be betting, or do you think this card just hits his opponents too frequently? It doesn't feel like it hits Klein too often.
Correct. It doesn't, but it does feel like it's even with the ace of spades in our hand, it still feels problematic, right? Like
Yeah.
we often have the best hand, but when we don't, we either are going to get a lot of snap folds or we're going to be behind. Not always for sure, but a lot of the time, you know, we're going to be behind. Like King Jack with the king of spades, okay, sure. It's hard to come up with maybe two tens, two black tens might decide to call. I guess they
Queen
maybe.
Queen 10 with the Queen of Spades, maybe.
Okay, yeah, there's some hands, but those hands that are we can get value from usually one way or another by the river. Either they're good enough to call a river bet, or they're bad enough to bluff on the river, and that's cool. Sometimes we're going to let them get there, of course, like Queen 10 can get there, but I think it's pretty reasonable when you have Bill Klein's. The Bill Klein factor is probably really screwing up Garrett a little bit, I would think.
That is
And would
an awesome name for like a dance club. The Bill Klein factor.
a dance club.
Yeah.
Now, when you say a dance club, do you mean like a club where they teach you to dance, or more like a nightclub type deal?
Like a nightclub.
The Bill Klein
The
factor.
best, they have the best lamps, so much luminescence.
It's amazing. Like most nightclubs, you can't really see, and that's like
Yeah.
a bonus, sort of. So maybe you're interested into that person over there, and it's hard to tell. And everyone looks better in the dark, right? But Bill Klein's goes the other way with it. He's like, we're gonna know all of your flaws will be revealed.
Right.
At the
So,
Bill
like,
Klein factor.
So imagine a scenario. You go to the Bill Klein Factor nightclub.
Yeah.
And you see across the room a potential paramour, and you walk up to this potential paramour, and you speak to them, and you realize, oh, their face isn't as good as I would have liked it to be, and I can tell because of all of these excellent high luminescence Bill Klein lamps. And therefore, I'm going to, instead of making a mistake, walk away from the situation. And as you walk away, Bill Klein comes up to you in his Spalding pullover, which he always wears, and he gives you the finger guns, and he says, "That's the Bill Klein factor." And then he walks away.
And here's the externality of all this. Guess who's going to go buy some Bill Klein lamps now? It's like, wow, that saved me. I got to give back.
Yeah.
And also I got to, turn on things. So maybe I bring back another potential paramour. Like, I'm not even going to hook up with anyone now until I bring him back to my place and turn on all the lights just so I can really see. It's not nothing dastardly.
It's got to be Bill Klein lights, of course. It's got to be Bill Klein lights.
Yep. This is the kind of hole we fall into sometimes. Anyway.
Yeah. And here we are in the hole.
Yeah. So the Bill Klein factor is maybe another reason to decide to check here, where he can have flushes. Both these guys are liable to make plays at us on this card also. Andy, of course, has trip 9 sometimes. I would also be worried if Andy has a hand like Jack 10, he might fold if we bet again. Like when we bet into 2 players again on this board, he might fold. That sucks. Like we'd really want to get value out of top pair, and we're setting ourselves up to potentially not do that if we bet. So I think a check is probably right. Although you can make a case to try and build the pot here with top and the nut flush draw.
Yeah, I think I prefer a check as well. I think it all makes sense.
Yeah.
I'll go with that. I'll go with the check.
Cool.
And he gets there. It's a 7 of spades on the river.
I mean, okay.
The board now reads Jack of spades, 5 of spades, 9 of hearts, 9 of spades, 7 of spades. So Andy now has the nut flush. Not Andy, excuse me. Garrett has the nut flush. Andy's hand has been downgraded from trip 9s to the 8 high flush, even though it's an upgrade. Feels like a downgrade, right? And
I mean, we went from a very powerful hand to like, well, I hope no one has a spade because it's always better than mine. Not always, but usually. Yeah.
Maybe Bill Klein has 2 6s with a 6 of spades or something, but whatever. Bill Klein is not part of this hand anymore. We don't care about that. Anyway, 7 of spades on the river. Bill Klein checks. He is done. He has given up. Andy checks. It doesn't feel like you can go for value with the 8 of spades here, right?
No, I mean, Garrett's the kind of guy who might take a shot at this, when everyone checks and he doesn't have anything. If he's got ace king of diamonds here, like he absolutely might take a shot when it checks through on the turn, right? Like that's not crazy at all.
Yeah.
I think we want to give him a chance to do that. We're setting up what we like to call a game theory disaster spot. Not perfectly, but a fair amount of like, we may fold out all the worst hands and get called by all the better hands. Not exactly. We might get heroed sometimes by a worse hand, but it's problematic. And of course, we can get blown off the hand too if we bet. And why would we want to let that happen when we can check and we have a reasonable calling hand, depending on what Bill Klein does?
All right, so Garrett has enough flush. It is not the nuts because it's a paired board, but it's pretty needs to bet this, right?
Yeah.
So how much should he bet, and what is he targeting to get called by?
Okay, so the pot has 17,600 in it. Let's start with what's he targeting, right? Because then that should help us figure out what we want to bet. Okay, I think we're targeting other spades mostly, and
like
we're targeting
spades plus mostly.
Yeah, like king jack with the king of spades, queen jack with the queen of spades, hands like that mostly. These guys may have turned a flush also. Like queen of spades could be out there.
Yeah,
for sure. And it just like checks through on the turn, and then we get to beat them, and they're going to feel completely obligated to call. So some made flushes on the turn may decide to put the money in. This is where we get to take advantage of our image as Garrett, right? Like where everyone thinks we're crazy and we try and buy every pot, which we often do, but here we actually have it. And so I think we should bet kind of big so we can not only target the obvious calls, which are probably the Broadway spades calls. Like I think the queen of spades is just going to feel like it has to call if Andy has it anyway. If Bill Klein folds and Andy has the queen of spades, he has to call, I think,
Yeah,
against us. But we can, if we bet, I think we should bet like the way Garrett would if he didn't have it, where, kind of big-ish and try and get heroed by some other hands. That's what I would think. So if there's,
yeah.
17-6 in there, I don't know, 13,000, 14,000, something like that.
Sure. Another factor, now maybe not against opponents as tricky as Andy, because he's a very tricky player, but something I
Yeah.
find myself doing in spots like this a lot is betting big for multiple reasons. One is to get more value and, balance and stuff, but also it makes it a lot easier of a bet fold. Like
Mm,
if you, against most opponents, if you bet like pot size bet or something similar to that, and you get raised when you have a hand like the nut flush on a paired board, you can know you're behind, versus if you bet like a third of the pot, then you could kind of talk yourself into maybe I'm not behind and usually end up making
right,
a crying call that's wrong.
right.
So it makes it a little easier to play. Now, that may not be the case against a player like Andy, who's very tricky. So I don't know if that's really a factor in Garrett's decision to bet big, as you suggested, because he does. He bets 15,000.
Yeah, that's big.
So right in line with what you want to do. Bill Klein, of course, folds very quickly. And as Andy, obviously we have three choices here. It seems like the most obvious choice is to call, because it is Garrett, and we do have a relatively good hand with the 8 of spades here. Against some players, you can just fold this hand, but it's
Mm-hmm.
Garrett, so I don't think you can. So folding's kind of out of the question, right?
Folding seems like the worst option of the three to me.
Yeah.
Like we have enough of a hand to call with, and we've got a hand with reasonable blockers if we decide we want to take a shot here and get him to fold the better hand.
Right. Because to be clear, if we raise, this is a bluff. We're not trying to get called by a worse hand.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, I
So,
guess once in a while, a good thing would happen, but no, we wouldn't. We're just trying to get a fold if we do it.
spoiler alert, Andy thinks that Garrett is strong enough that he has to raise instead of just calling. Do you think that's a reasonable thought process? Do you think maybe Andy's stepping out a little bit, getting a little too fancy because he does raise instead of just calling when he thinks it's possible Garrett could be full of it?
I kind of do think so, actually. We do have a hand which does line up pretty well as a hand. Like sometimes the hand like demands that you make a play, right? So we have a spade in our hand. We have the card that is paired on the board. So we block a lot of the things we'd want to block. And so you could make the argument, if we're ever going to raise as a bluff, this is one of the best hands to do it with. So we might as well pull the trigger. You could make that argument. I think a lot of people would. At the same point, isn't Garrett the guy, like, of all the guys, like, he's just a guy who doesn't, it's like Jamie Gold just bet here. Like, he just doesn't have to have it. And why not just make a call instead of, like, potentially putting ourselves in huge jeopardy here when we just don't have to? Like, we can put in 15,000, sometimes be right, sometimes be wrong. We're getting almost 2-1. We're actually getting better than 2-1. We don't have to be right that often, like 30% of the time. It feels like a call is just the correct move because the 8 of spades, I would think, is going to be good enough of the time. What do you think?
I have two thoughts. On this, one in favor of raising and one in favor of calling. In favor of calling versus raising, I think a huge factor in this is the full house blocker that Andy chooses to raise, right? That he has a 9 as a full house blocker. I know it's Garrett. I know he's a bit wider, but the 9 doesn't factor too much into Garrett's full houses when he 3-bets pre-flop. He doesn't have that much Jack 9 or 9-7 in his range. He has a little bit because he's Garrett, but he certainly doesn't have that much. His most likely full house is Jack Jack or 5-5, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't really seem like that blocker is as meaningful as it seems on the surface to have the 9, right?
That's a great point.
In favor of raising, though, is I know Garrett's tricky. He's going to show up with different stuff some of the time. But with the check back on the turn, this line looks a lot like a big spade. It looks a lot like a king or an ace of spades. And if it wasn't Garrett, I would think I was behind almost all the time if I were Andy.
Right. That's fair.
That type of hand is going to have a very tough time calling a raise because, as we know, when the board's paired and you have the nut flush and the guy raises, you're like, okay, well, what the hell does he have then if I have the nut flush?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, here's another thing too, though. Based on the action, we assume Garrett is usually going to bet his full houses on the turn. If he has jacks in his hand, he's almost always going to bet that on the turn when the 9 pairs and the spade comes. That's like one of the
Yeah,
best hands to bet, right? Like we can
true.
get value from all these other super strong hands. And as we see, Andy would of course have been forced to call. Like it's a great card if you have 2 jacks in your hand. So I think we can not completely eliminate, of course, but really cut down on the number of full houses Garrett has just from the action. I agree. I think that's more of a telltale sign that Garrett doesn't have a full house, much more so than the 9 in our hand. Because like you said,
Yeah.
he doesn't really have jack 9 or 9-5 anyway. Like, I mean, we can eliminate pocket 9s. Cool. We can eliminate quads. There was only one combo of that anyway. So yeah, I think that's fair. I hear what you're saying about this is a line that Garrett might really take with the Ace of Spades, but this is also because it's a line that looks a lot like the Ace of Spades. Garrett might really take the same line without the Ace of Spades or without his big spade in his hand. You know, he's Garrett. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that that means that he really has a big spade enough of the time that we can't just call for and make money. You know,
That's a fair point. I think there's merits to both ideas.
Yeah,
I think
me too.
folding is meritless, but calling has merit. I think raising has merit as well.
Yeah.
In this case, Andy figures it out correctly that that's the only way to win because Garrett does have the Ace of Spades in his hand. And he does raise. He raises his entire stack. That's called going all in. He makes it 78,900 over 15K.
Yeah.
It is a huge raise. So this might be a balance thing. Does it have to be this big? Could he not just make it 60K and save himself $18,000, $19,000 when he gets called?
I mean, I would think he could do that pretty comfortably, but he's trying to sell the idea, I think, that like, boy, I sure hope you have the Ace of Spades. I sure hope you have it. Guy who kind of never has anything better than the Ace of Spades. Like, I sure hope you have, quote, the top of your range. I'm looking like I'm trying to get full value from it, right? So I think probably 60K is going to do the trick almost the exact same amount of the time, though, so then he could just save that $19,000 or near $19,000, which is probably a better play. I don't know. Andy may be aware based on history with Garrett and their dynamic that the all-in play is what he's going to do in these spots when he has it. And so he's just got to do it as a bluff too.
Yeah, I guess that's certainly possible.
Yeah.
But in a vacuum, if you're ever playing in a tournament with players that you're never going to play against again, and you're in a spot like this where you feel like you have to bluff, but you're deciding how to size it and you're really deep like this, and you feel like 60K is going to do the same trick as 78,900, no reason to make it 78,900.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I will say this. So we plugged these guys into the solver and asked the solver what it thought about this. And before I even get to tell you what the solver said, it was incredibly hard to come up with reasonable ranges for these guys based on how they play this hand and all the action, because it's all the action to the river, because that's when we finally get heads up to like try and come up with it. So I'm not sure how great this is, but still I did my best to plug in all these percentages of like how many combos of this does he have? How many combos of ace queen does he have? And so on and so forth. And the solver really wants Andy to raise, like pretty big time. It wants him to raise 92% of the time. It's like, we have blockers, baby. Let's do this, just in case. Let's go, and there's some. If you're
going to raise sometimes, this is a hand that makes sense.
Yes. And yeah, it is. It's one of the great hands. Like, it's going to be hard for us to have a better hand that blocks that's worse than this. You know what I mean? And you put those things, like we've blocked trip 9s, we have a spade. We're never going to have a worse spade and have a 9 in our hand, I don't think it's possible.
Seems very unlikely, yeah.
Yeah.
To have 9-6 off doesn't seem likely.
So I mean, we could have a hand like Jack 10, I guess, with the 10 of spades and decide to turn that into a bluff. Maybe that's actually a better hand in some ways.
It might actually be better because the 10 of spades is better for blocking Garrett's 3-betting spades, and the Jack is better for blocking Jack's full.
The 10 also, not that this would come often, but also blocks a straight when the 7 of spades comes in on the river.
True.
Like that's kind of cool too. Now, I don't think a straight's going to consider calling that much.
So does the 8, by the way. So that doesn't actually make a difference between the 8 and the 10.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. It does. I mean, when there's 4 spades and the board's paired, it probably doesn't matter, right? In terms of that piece of it, but just in case. But the question is really, is this a just in case play by Andy? When I say that, this is something we've run into sometimes where it's like, I can call profitably, but sometimes I'm losing. And if I just make this play, I'm also going to capture all that value too. I might as well just capture it all if I can. Like maybe I can fold out the top of Garrett's range here or near the top. Maybe. Like I can maybe fold out the king of spades. If you think you can fold out the king of spades, you're probably supposed to do this, right?
for it to be a just in case play, you have to be pretty sure you can fold the top of their range, though.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not so just in case anymore because you're putting a lot more money at risk. Like for a just in case play to be a just in case play, it's usually I'm probably winning, but if I raise, I'm like 95% going to fold out if he has a better hand, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know
Yeah.
if that's the case in this situation with these guys and their history, but maybe it is. So the solver likes it, obviously. The solver loves
Solver
it.
loves it. Solver's like, let's do this.
So how should Garrett react? He has the ace of spades.
I mean, it feels pretty straightforward to me. I'm the guy who always wants to call everything, right? I never want to fold. But I feel like I can justify a call here pretty straightforwardly, right? First of all, I think we're actually at the top of our range. Like we almost, maybe once in a while, we're going to check back a full house on the turn, but we're usually betting that because it's such a great spot to get value, right? So this may be the best hand we ever have here, or near the very,
So
very, very
distribution
top
would
of our range.
demand distribution would demand a call then.
Having the ace of spades is pretty good, right? Like that's pretty sweet. Now, admittedly, we can only beat a bluff, admittedly, right?
Yeah, of course.
Like Andy's never doing this with the king of spades.
No.
But here's the thing. Andy is exactly the kind of guy who's going to make a play just like this with a hand just like this. Andy and Garrett are the two guys most likely to do that, right? So against those guys, folding a hand as good as the nut flush seems kind of just bad to me. Seems like you're just supposed to close your eyes and call and be like, I hope it works out. I know you got me sometimes. Congratulations, you got all this great value. But I also don't have to be right that often. Like I can be, as is almost always the case, as is always the case, in fact, in No Limit, you have to be right less than half the time. I think we're going to be good. What? Yeah, I think we're going to be good enough of the time here that we can totally call with the ace of spades. And again, if we're not calling with this hand, we're not calling with any hand. Then what the hell are we doing here? Like, of course, you can sometimes fold the very top of your range against certain opponents, but Andy's not one of those opponents, and neither is Garrett, for that matter.
Right. I was going to add the caveat to what you were saying because I agree with everything that you're saying. That this is Andy, or you take Andy or one of his ilk, a player who is creative and good and capable of bluffing. You probably have to call it the ace of spades, but against the majority of the poker playing world, this is a fold.
Against the guys who aren't going to have almost any moves here, this is a clear fold. Against Stephen Chidwick, it's a call. That's
well, right. But I mean, like, I'm not saying the poker pro world. Against the majority of the poker playing world, this is an easy fold.
People. Yeah, I mean, most people aren't check raising the river without absolutely having it in every clear possible way.
Yeah,
and the king of spades would never count as that in anyone's mind who's any good at all, right?
I think this is a fold against Bill Klein. Even though Bill Klein is pretty good, I think this is probably a fold against Bill Klein. But I think against Andy, it's probably a call.
Yeah, that's probably right. I think it's a fold against a lot of players. I agree. The majority of players in poker, it's probably a fold, even though it sucks. It just sucks. But the guys who are crazy and aggressive or are just going to try and be balanced here, I think the ace of spades is, when we're at the top of our range, is a clear call, and there's nothing more to it.
Yep. And Garrett's going to wish he did that because he folds.
Yeah, he folds. Now, interesting. So we plugged this into the solver. And before we plugged it in, Grant said to me, I mean, the solver's just going to say call, right? So the solver does say call, but only 70% of the time, which I'm actually a little surprised about. It doesn't know we're up against Andy. It just thinks we're up against,
a balanced range.
A normal range here. So it still thinks it should call, but it doesn't think it's wild to fold either, which I'm surprised about. I would have thought it's like, of course you call, you always call 99% or something.
Well, yeah, 70% is still pretty high though. It wants to call a decent amount of the time.
It's true. Yeah.
And if it did know it was Andy, it would definitely be higher.
It would be like, oh, well, you didn't flip the Andy switch, yeah. Can I pick more than 100%?
Yeah. The solver does need an Andy switch. And maybe Garrett needs an Andy switch. He should have an Andy switch, shouldn't he? He plays Andy all the time.
I don't understand. This is just something we see. We did a video a little while ago with Matt Berkey against Bryn Kenny where a similar thing happened where Matt Berkey bet the queen high flush on the river. The board was paired. And Bryn Kenny check raised a straight. And it's unclear. We were unclear at the time if it was the greatest play of all time or if it was just for value or what was going on, right? It was just hard to know. And Matt Berkey found a fold, and it was like, Bryn Kenny's one of the guys, I just don't think you're supposed to fold a hand that good to. Like, you're just not supposed to. And you take some big losses against those guys as a result, for sure. But, like, you have to stand up to these guys, too, and call with your good hands. Like, otherwise, you're just going to always have to lose. You just can't beat them,
Yeah. I mean, we know Garrett is willing to stand up to guys, though. We've seen him do it before. So this isn't like a problem for him in his poker game.
You're right.
So happened in this instance, he he chose to fold in a spot where we don't think he should against this opponent, and he got it wrong. But that's going to
Yeah.
happen, you know. He can't get it all right every time.
Of course, but it just seems like the fundamentals of distribution here really demand a call. Like if
Yeah.
he thinks about the hands that I get here with, like, and against an opponent who can be bluffy and will take blockers and do this, like, and I know that. And by the way, like, may have a kind of crappy hand, but think like I'm like taking it, like, you know, maybe trying to rebluff me even sometimes. Like, I just can't fold a hand this good. Like, it feels like
Yeah.
that should be the answer.
I mean, Andy does have a range advantage. He does have more full houses as played. He should, but that's probably not enough
Yeah.
of a factor
Right.
to say we should fold.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can bet fold the king of spades here, but I think we have to bet call the ace of spades.
I think you're right. I think you're right.